All right, so welcome everyone. This is Y Academy session led by Gerard. He's been a leading security researcher doing regular audits with Spearbit and Code Arena. And also he's been focusing a lot on bridges lately. So I'll now hand over to Gerard. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Block Dev, and welcome everyone. What I've done, I've collected a couple of the high-risk findings that I found the last year and a half, or was closely involved with in finding. So I hope it would be interesting for all of you to have a look at those. So yeah, I'm Gerard. Reviewed about 75 blockchain protocols so far. So initially I started doing that for Code Arena. So that was more or less the entire last year. And then actually this year I spent most of the time on Spearbit. So I've been doing lots of Spearbit audits.
Gerard, I'm sorry to interrupt you. There's some sort of gray triangle right in the middle of your screen blocking some of the content there on the title page.
Oh, there was, yeah. Is it gone now?
Yes, it is. There's one at the top, but it's not blocking anything.
Oh, wait. Let's see if I can close that one. No. Yeah, that's something from Zoom, but I don't know how to get rid of it. Oh, I think it's gone. Is it gone now?
Yeah,
it is
very
gone,
small.
yes.
Yeah, cool.
Sorry for the interruption.
No problem. Good to alert me because I'm too focused otherwise on my presentation. I was telling about the audits I'm doing. So Spearbit, Code Arena, Sherlock, I did some audits, and I did some stuff for Immunify. Actually, some of the findings that I'm showing today, that's I reported those to Immunify. And before I started my audits, I created a programming depth course for a school here in Netherlands, in The Hague. And that's still available here on the Web3 Examples website. So there's also a lot of videos about how to create a dep. So that's how I learned Solidity myself by explaining it. It's a little bit dated by now because everything's moving so fast, but yeah, if you want, you can still have a look at it. Okay, I'm going to talk about these 8 findings, and if you have questions in between, you can just ask them, and in the end we'll also have some time for questions. So no problem interrupting. Okay, this is the first one I'm looking at. This was one for Code Arena. And I was looking through the code of Yield, and they included a library, this one, the Yield Mod library, and was looking through it. And yeah, it's kind of difficult to spot anything wrong with this. So yeah, it seems to be all right, but yeah, what could be wrong with it? So then I thought, well, let's compare it to another version of this to see how much it has changed. Yeah, if anything has changed or whatever. And maybe if I switch between those 2 versions, anyone can see what has changed between those 2 versions. Does anybody see the difference?
Yes. In fact, I work for Yield and I was involved with this change. So I know that we upgraded the Pragma, and so we wrapped the whole thing in unchecked to kind of emulate the lack of safe math that we depended on before in the prior version.
Yeah, the unchecked is a difference indeed, but there's another difference.
Uh-oh, I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay, well, I'll show it. What I did, I put it in a tool to compare the versions. And now you can see here the difference. So here it was larger or equal, and on the other side it's larger. So I didn't know exactly which one was right, but it clearly doesn't seem to be good to have this difference. So I reported that for Katarina, and indeed it was a problem. So the updated version was incorrect, and the other version, which was the original version, that one was correct. So I created sort of a tip out of this, and that's what I regularly do if I have some code and I maybe don't quite understand it. I try to find similar codes on GitHub or whatever, and then compare it to the code on GitHub, and then I check out the differences and yeah, see if I can find any differences. And sometimes that leads to issues that I find.
You'll work really well with. Yeah, he's one of our auditors, and he's a fan of this tip as well, like comparing code with the original source.
Yeah, the comparing stuff is, yeah, I think quite important, especially if you are auditing an updated version of something that you maybe have looked at before. Then it's always good to compare it to the previous version and to look at the differences. Okay, the next one. This is a part of the sense code. Does anybody see anything maybe weird about this? Not yet. I'll show it. So this, what's happening over here is that they're taking a memory copy of a part of an array. So that's what you can do to access the array a little bit easier. And then what they are doing here, they're assigning a value to the underscore series variable. And because this is a memory variable, it's a copy, so they're assigning something to the copy, but they are not assigning it to the original array. So in the end, after this piece of code, the value is lost. So this assigning over here doesn't have any use, and they wanted to put it in the array, yeah, because it was in a loop, and to find the largest value. But if you don't update it, then of course it's lost after this piece of code. So what they should have done is either at the end here put back the underscore series in the array again, or alternatively they could have used the storage indicator. So then it's like a pointer into that part of the array, and it's not a copy. So it's the difference between memory and storage, and it's pretty easy to get confused in that and to make errors with that. So that's of course my tip then, to be very aware of memory and storage, and to make sure there are no mistakes with that. Okay, the next one is about balancer. The letters are a bit small, so I hope you have good high-res monitor to be able to see the difference. Here I was looking into the sense protocol, and they were using balancer, and balancer has a hook, the on-exit pool hook, which is used when you exit the pool of balancer. And I didn't really know balancer all that well at the moment, so what I did, I was looking up some code on GitHub that was also using on-exit pool. and yeah, trying to see the difference between them. And the other one I found was of element finance. So that's also using a balancer. And then if you look at this, yeah, it's sort of similar what's happening here, but if you look carefully, there are differences. And what I did, I put it in a comparison tool and compared the difference. And then here at the top, I noticed there was something different. So here they're doing something with sender, and here they're doing something with recipient. So my initial thought was, well, they're clearly doing something wrong in the sense protocol. But then I looked further and I noticed actually it wasn't the sense protocol that was wrong, but it was the element finance protocol that was wrong. So this the one on the right that was in production at that moment, and the variable they are using here, you can see that here at the bottom, that's whose tokens are burned after you exit the pool. So it's sort of logical if you exit a pool that the tokens of the sender are being burned. But in this case, on the right case, in element finance, they were burning the tokens of the recipient, and the recipient is an address that you can specify. So the problem is then that you can just burn tokens of a random recipient. So that's clearly not what you want to do. So I sent this to Immunify actually, and I got a bounty for this. And the related tip is here that if you compare code to other code on GitHub and you find differences that you're not quite sure that the other code you're comparing with, which is 100% correct. The only thing you know, if there are differences, that you have to look into it and try to understand what the differences are and where they originate from. So if
Can I ask
any questions? Yeah, just go. Yeah.
So this one was live in production, right? This bug?
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like, I think you were auditing some other protocol when you discovered this. So like what led you to believe that you need to look into much more detail, like, because the code on the surface might be the same, but the underlying protocol or the backend protocol was different. So were you writing some POC to verify something, and then you discovered that there might be a difference?
No, I just was looking at the source code. So the left part is the part of sense, and I was just trying to understand what was going on and to verify if it's correct or not. So because it's quite complicated what's going on, I just wanted to have like another part of code to see if there are differences. And then I noticed here the recipient was being used, and I was just trying to understand which could be correct. And then I thought, well, the first one must be correct, and just the other one must be wrong. And then I sent it to Immunify, and they confirmed that there was something wrong. So then I was sure that something was wrong. So for Sense itself, it wasn't a finding at all. But of course, for another protocol, it is a finding.
Thanks.
Gerard, another gray box has crept into the top here.
Okay. Yeah, thanks.
It's smaller, but I don't think it's blocking anything. There's a small one now at the top of it. I don't know if it's different.
Oh, yeah, it's from Zoom.
Oops.
Oh wait, whoops.
There we go. Okay. It's not blocking anything.
Okay, yeah. Thanks. Okay, any other questions? Okay, here we go to the following, and this was actually also a problem with also with Balancer, and also while not auditing Balancer itself, but another protocol that was using Balancer. And here's a function of Balancer, the update weights gradually, and that was used in the other protocol. And we noticed, actually I was doing it with Eric Wang, and actually he noticed that there was something wrong here in this function. And yeah, we also reported this to Immunify and to the project itself, and we got also a bounty for this. So I don't know if anybody has already an idea what could be wrong here.
Can you give a hint?
It has got something to do with UINT 32 versus the UINT 256. I'll try to explain it here. I've highlighted now what's where the issues are. The problem is that what Balancer is doing, it's trying to compress values to 32 to UINT 32s, so they take up less space, so they can fit multiple values within one slot, and that's always, yeah, kind of tricky to do because you could make mistakes with it. So here you can see that start time and end time in the beginning are, or as parameters, are UINT 256, and they're being stored here with the set miscellaneous data and the get miscellaneous data via the insert UINT 32. They're stored as 32 or int 32. But here in the beginning, the start time and end time are being compared, and there they're not already shrinked to UINT 32. So yeah, this, for example, if end time is super large, so 2 to the power 32 or larger, then this require will not fill, because it will always, the start time will always be smaller than the end time. But when you compress the end time down to UINT 32, you have less bits left, so then the end time can be lower than it originally was. And then later on in this function, they decode the UINT 32. So they retrieve that value again. And then suddenly the end time could be small. So if the end time, for example, was 2 to the power 32, and if you put it in UINT 32, then you end up with a value of 0. So then at this moment, the end time happens to be 0. And that meant that the current time is always bigger than 0. So it ended up in this if branch, which resulted in a wrong way of evaluating this function. So then the logic went completely in the wrong direction. So is this clear what's going on?
So is the moral always use safe casting when downcasting?
Yeah, that's a good idea to verify that, yeah. Or at the you could also at the function here make sure that the input is already UINT 32. Then it's already checked outside. But otherwise, it would be good to have like a safe cast or a similar function to that. So more general, be very careful with the typecasts to fewer bits. Okay, when Eric had found this part of this error, he said there was something wrong with it. So I also looked in the code and I actually found a different problem, which was a little bit related, but was still different. And it has also to do with uint32, but here it was more related to the insert function. Somebody seeing already what is going wrong here in the insert function?
Probably the bit or.
Yeah, it has something to do with or. I'll show it what's going on. If the value of start time, or in this case end time, is, yeah, it goes for both. If they're larger than uint32, then actually the bits are sort of overflowing, and when you OR that to the original value, then you overflow with the higher bits. So if you see here below how the values are packed into a word, you have here the start time and then the end time, and then here you have further important bits. So this restrict LP, that happens to be an important bit for the protocol. So if your end time is slightly over the 32 bits, so it has the 33rd bit also set, then it's being ORed over here, and then you can override this value over here. So then you can actually manipulate bits that you shouldn't manipulate. And they were even working on a version at that moment where there were even the unused bits over here were also being assigned for other purposes. I think later on they didn't use that code anymore. But by crafting a specific end time, you could manipulate all the bits here that were higher than this. Is it clear what's going on here?
But they can be more than 32 bytes, right? So like both the left hand side and the right side is 32 bytes, right? Even after you OR it.
Sorry,
probably I didn't understand the bug properly.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind if you drilled down a little more, Gerard. I think I got lost along the way. Can you give like an example or something?
Yeah, let me see. So like the entire word is 256 bits. I'm trying to keep that line away, but it's just over the title, so I'll just ignore it. So the entire word is 256 bits, and the part that you're trying to manipulate is 32 bits. So that's a smaller part than the entire word. So what you should normally make sure that that the end time fits within the 32 bits, then everything would be okay. But suppose the end time has a lot of higher bits set, then in the function the insert 32 bits here, then it takes that value over here, and it shifts it to the left, and it ORs it to the word. And here you see it's bytes 32, and that's not bits 32. So bytes 32 is far larger than this part. So you can access the bits that are to the left here. I'm not sure if I explained it right, but if it's clear to everyone, let's call it like
Nibbler
that.
seems like in the comments he's got a good understanding. Do you have any comment you could say to help Nibbler?
Yeah, well, it's just, I mean, you're trying to put this 256-bit value in a 36 or 32-bit hole, right? You have a 32-bit space available, and you're trying to put 256 bits there. So everything, bits 33 through, 255 or 256 are all going to land on top of stuff where you don't want it to land.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, thanks, Nibbler. Yeah, it could be fun to experiment with this a little bit and see if you can overflow it with it. So I had a nice demonstrator to see how it would overflow. I didn't copy paste it in here, but maybe that would have helped to explain it a little bit further. So the tip is, in general, whenever you're ORing those values, you have to be very, very careful. And this pattern of ORing values and adding them, that happens actually quite often. I've seen it in multiple projects. They're doing that. So if you're not careful, you can overwrite stuff. Okay, let's go on to the OpenSea. So OpenSea was one of the bigger audits this year. And I did actually for Code Arena, but with help of some Spearbit colleagues, we did an audit. So this one was actually found by a colleague of mine, but it's a very interesting one. So I'm trying to explain this one too. It was one of the high findings of the OpenSea Code Arena audit. Oh no, wait, that's the next one. This one is of course also for OpenSea. So this was almost a high finding, but in the end it turned out not to be a big problem. Yeah, what they're doing here, they're using assembly to analyze data and to transform it to other type of data. So the input type here, the basic order type, that is a value of between 0 and 23. And that's actually a combination of two values, one of an order type, which is on the top right here, which has 4 values. And the other one is the basic order root type, which has 6 values. So the combination of those two, 4 times 6, would normally fit exactly within the 0 to the 23 value. So what they are doing here is calculating the values out of that. So I was trying here to understand what they're doing in the assembly. So I created a table here. So I analyzed here this piece of code and created a table what was going on. So on the left here, there's the basic order type with some values. Then first it's divided by 4. So then you get value 1 till 0 and 1, 2, 3, 4, still higher. And this is the values they match with. 0 to 6 or 0 to 5 match with these values, and 6 and 7 are actually out of range, so they shouldn't not be used. So first you subtract the value of 2, then you get these values. Then you check if this is larger than 2. Then That's these values. Then you multiply those two. Then you get these values. You check it if it's equal to 2. You add those two. And then finally you get these resulting value types like native ERC20, ERC721, and ERC1155. So for the first 5, 6 values, that's exactly what you want. So this was also to verify that this code was correct. What I noticed here, if you continue putting higher values, so like overflowing the input value, then you get for the left side here out of range values, but on the right side you get different values, 4 and 5, and those 4 and 5 happens to be legal values. So this would be a combination on the left an illegal value and on the right a legal value. So that's, yeah, would be bound to get into trouble. So actually this was part of quite a larger piece of assembly, but I condensed it a little bit to fit on the screen. And it turns out so that you get a value, an invalid type combined with a valid type. And all the way through the code, the code continues to work. So in assembly, everything is fine. But then luckily they switched back to solidity again. And then at this line over here, they checked if the route is a specific value. So this value has a range between 0 and 23. So if you get a route which is higher than that, oh no, this was 0 to 5. So if you get a route of a value of 6, then Solidity checks that and says, well, it doesn't fix within an enum range, and then it gives an error. So luckily over here, the code reverts, and then there's no problem. But if they would have translated this piece also to assembly, then you wouldn't have such strict checks, and yeah, there could have been a real high-risk bug. So the conclusion is, yeah, be careful with assembly because it doesn't have any checks, range checks, but also overflow and flow checks. And also this is like a good way to, yeah, analyze what's going on in assembly. Does anybody know, by the way, why they're using this trick with the greater than? No, that's because if you do it like this, then you don't need an if-then-else statement. So you just have a couple of calculations, but you don't have if-then-else statement. And the if-then-else statement has a higher guess cost than some greater than and multiplication calculations. So this is a gas improvement option.
So in cases like these where like it might look like that the protocol got luckily saved, like devs might or might not know about that there's getting saved by this if condition later on. So do you suggest still fixing it, or like fixing it before, or is it okay if this code goes through in production, with respect to your opinion?
Yeah, I think they later on added some checks here beforehand so that the error is detected earlier. So this would have been safe in production, but it's also pretty risky. And in audits, I also often mention stuff that's sort of a risky code, and if you're not careful, then future devs could easily make a mistake. So it's always better to make your code as safe as possible.
Thanks.
Okay, this one is the other one of OpenSea that was found by a colleague. What they were doing here in the top here in a loop, they were checking some values and yeah, putting it in an error buffer. So yeah, if there would be an error in the loop, they would detect it this way. And they also are using here this trick to prevent having an if statement. So they're doing two different things here. They're comparing new amount with amount. And if that's less than, then you get a value of 1, and shift left by 1, that's a value of 2. And they OR it with this one, and it's checking if there's a 0 amount. So in this case, you get a 2, and in this case, you would get a 1. So then the error buffer would have a value of 1 or 2. And then in the end, they would check here if the error is 1 or the error is 2, and then they would revert or throw an overflow or whatever. But there's something wrong in here. Does somebody recognize that already? Not yet. Well, the problem is that the case for 3 was missing over here. So the error buffer was done in a loop, and the value is being ORed. So it's taken the previous version and sort of adds the next version. So in one part of the loop, you could have an error indicated by 1, and then later on you could have an error indicated by 2. And if you OR 1 with 2, then it's basically adding 1 and 2 together. So you get a value of 3. So that means that both of the error situations have occurred. And that's an even worse error, of course. But if you only check 1 and 2, yeah, then you're not detecting the error situation of 3. And yeah, that would be pretty bad, of course. So is this clear?
Yeah, this is clear. It feels like this example and the last one, in both cases, kind of writing out a full grid of the possibilities would help clarify the answer. And I've definitely found that too in a lot of cases, like just, stop, let's write out all the different possible conditions and like have two X and Y axes and kind of look at it from that perspective.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Good way to do that. I also make lots of drawings of how the protocol works and then tables and that kind of stuff. So I'm more visually oriented, so that helps to do that. So the tip is be careful with those kind of switch statements.
You do your drawings and stuff like by hand, or is there a tool you like to use?
Actually, the drawings I usually do in PowerPoint. So you can use like any tool, but yeah, PowerPoint is like a very simple, straightforward tool, but still powerful enough to create drawings in. But yeah, you could use any tool actually.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is the last one of the list, and then we have some time left for questions at the end. This one was from the tracer protocol, currently called Mycelium. They had a very interesting idea about an invariant check. So they're doing all kinds of actions, and then in the invariant check, they check if everything is all right. So if there are no tokens missing or whatever, and they have a function to check that invariant. And if the invariant is wrong somehow, then they pause the contract. So they have this modifier over here. So first they check if it's not paused, then they do the code over here. Then they check the invariant check and to see if everything is okay. And if it's not okay, then it's going to pause the contract. And here in the end, they're checking the post again. Does anybody see what's wrong with this?
Did you say they're going to pause the contract if there's a problem?
Yeah.
And then they're going to check to see whether it's paused and revert?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they should never be able to pause, right? Because if they're checking that then that paused is false, then if they pause, then it will revert, right?
Yes, exactly. That's the problem. So yeah, it seems logical to set pause, and it also seems logical to revert. But if you first set pause and then you require not pause, then you're going to revert. So your entire pause, what you've just done, is also reverted. So you're actually never going to pause your contract. So it's sort of mind-boggling to understand what's going on there. But yeah, you're sort of shooting yourself in the foot when you try to set pause, and yeah, you're going to revert on that. And thinking of that, it's actually quite a difficult problem, because when there's a problem and if tokens are missing or whatever, if you detect it, then of course you want to immediately roll back what's going on. So you want to revert. But if you also want to set the pause state, that doesn't fit well with rolling back. And even if you are able to set pause, then it's also pretty risky, because it's easy to shoot yourself in the foot if something goes wrong and then you pause and then nothing works anymore. I was able to create an example how they could do that with trying to call the code and then catch the error and then setting the pause in a higher level, but that was kind of complicated code. So they finally got rid of this piece of code, and I think now they're checking the invariance offline and then calling pause from the outside. So that's a lot safer, of course.
You know, one thing I've noticed is it seems like every protocol uses pause differently. Like some just implement it across the board on all of their external functions. Some choose to say use it on deposit but not withdrawal. I've also seen it the opposite. Do you have any generalized feelings on that, or is it just really case by case? Because I usually recommend more is better, because if there's some sort of problem you need to pause, might as well pause everything. But I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, that would also be my gut feeling. If there's something wrong, just to then pause everything. And then sometimes you'll even see multiple pause variables in different parts of the code. So then you would have to pause multiple pause functions. So it's, you have to be very careful with that indeed. But yeah, probably better safe than sorry. Yeah, so these were all my high-risk findings that I've collected. So if you have any other questions, I think in the chat are a couple of questions. I didn't look at them yet, but...
Invader was just asking about pause. He seems to be against doing pause at all. What are your feelings on just not even incorporating pause? He said, if you want to do pause, go code Web 2, he says.
Yeah, that's also an idea. Yeah. If your code is super solid and you're taking care of all the situations, then maybe you wouldn't want that. But yeah, it's like the same discussion about upgradability. You wouldn't really want upgradability, but yeah, sometimes in the initial periods of your protocol, it's sometimes good to have upgradability.
So you're not firmly in the upgradability is a bug camp. You're open to some, especially at the beginning of a protocol. It sounds like you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, yeah. Usually because yeah, it doesn't really help to be super opposed to it, because the protocol usually has their own conviction that they want to be upgradable. So I'm usually more of pointing out the risks of stuff, and yeah, the protocol is going to decide what they're going to do.
Yeah, feel free to drop your questions in chat, guys, or just speak up. I've been kind of writing down these points. Oh, sorry, we're going to say something, Black Dad?
Yeah. So this is Gerard, knowing that you've been spending some time on bridges lately. The question is related to what are general feelings about like auditing DeFi versus bridges, and what kind of different challenges that you face in both, and maybe different in mindset of auditing in both these categories.
Yeah, well, bridges are actually pretty complicated things, actually, because they're over multiple chains. So you have to be careful of all those chains, and one problem is that normally in one chain, if something goes wrong, you can revert and roll back whatever you were doing. But if you're doing something in a bridge and you're on the other chain, you can't just roll back, because it doesn't communicate back to the original chain. So there's like an inherent risk with bridges. Yeah, if something goes wrong on the other chain, how are you going to do that? If yeah, how you're going to revert, or how you're going to communicate back to the original chain. And even if you communicate back to the original chain, yeah, there also something could go wrong. So that's kind of complicated. And also there's lots of tokens being locked usually within bridges. So that's kind of a honeypot. So it's also makes the risk a bit higher. And yeah, in all the audits I've done with bridges, we found lots of small issues. So that's also a sign that bridges are pretty complicated and relatively dangerous.
With regard to bridges, we were recently considering doing some extended research, and we were talking about, well, we were just kind of asking ourselves, is there a specific category of bugs that is kind of, related to bridges? And when we started looking at all of the known hacks, we found that they were more common vulnerabilities and common bugs that you would find, and we didn't really notice a certain class of bugs that are directly related to bridges. Would you agree with that, or are there any kind of bugs you would especially look for when you're reviewing a bridge?
Yeah, I think any normal issue can also occur in a bridge. It's just like a chain of different contracts linked together, and even to understand the flow through all the contracts and how the bridge works is kind of complicated already. So yeah, you could just find any kind of abnormal issues. For example, in the Nomad bridge hack, it was just a small oversight within a smart contract. So it was allowing a 0 where you shouldn't allow a 0. So that could be in any kind of project that could go wrong. Only in a bridge that has super high consequences.
I've looked into the Nomad hack a lot. So would you say that a proper mitigation for that would have been checking that that parameter did not get passed in as 0? Because I think it got passed in through an automated, I'm not sure if it was an automated contract or some sort of automated kind of like deployment script. And they didn't take into consideration that in this scenario they would be deploying, that it would end up passing a 0. So like, I think I saw them argue that, that wasn't the mitigation, but I feel like you cannot just think of every possible reason why, something might get passed in a 0. And I feel like having that 0 check in that particular case would have probably saved them, or I know it would have.
Yeah. They added a 0 check, really low level in the protocol to make sure that a certain check, that it wasn't 0. So that was the main fix for them. But you could have prevented it in multiple places by adding 0 checks. But yeah, it's always better to be safe than sorry. Any other questions about bridges or other subjects?
I just want to highlight the importance of PowerPoint pictures. Like I've seen your diagrams and they're really useful for the audits that we've done in the past. So yeah, they're really great. Trying to integrate that in my workflow as well.
Yeah. Blockdev is talking about the images that I've made for example, the Connext bridge, and detailing all the steps that are taken and all the smart contracts, and actually at each invocation of another smart contract was an arrow in the diagram. And then you
It's going to be released with the audit report, your diagram.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks.
Actually, there's a previous, the initial version of the Connext audit for a previous version of Connext, which was still based on Nomad. There's a similar image, and that's already on the Spearbit repo. But that I updated that image for the second audit that we were doing, but it was changed considerably, and it helps quite a lot. Yeah, that's the one. It's in the meeting chat now. And it helps when you're looking into the smart contacts and seeing an invocation in you having doubt what was that for, and then you can just look at the image and see how that connects to other parts of the project.
I have a question about the audit process, Gerard. So like you've given all these great tips today, and I've been writing them down. And one of the things we've been discussing internally at Y Academy is, can we create some sort of, actual checklist that you can go through when you're conducting an audit? And I kind of feel like it's like that midwit meme where like at first people are like, give me a checklist. And then the midwit's like, oh, you can't use a checklist because it's so complex. And now we're kind of like at the far end, we're like, maybe we can use a checklist if we, are comprehensive enough and we're thoughtful enough. So what do you think about, potentially, I guess, adding more structure to the process, with checklists or something like that?
Yeah, interesting question. I've been thinking about that quite a lot. Of course, if you would have a checklist, you couldn't just give it to anybody and just follow the checklist and then you're done with it. So you still have to use a lot of knowledge to interpret those checklists. And actually, before what I'm doing now, I used to be an IT auditor at Ernst & Young. So that's more like the audits for banks and that kind of stuff. And there the audits would more be focused on processes and slightly less technical. But in the traditional audit world, normally you would have so-called standards. So there are sort of like checklists of how stuff is supposed to work and how it's supposed to be. And that's usually you would take like a standard and follow everything in the standard and see how stuff is implemented and if it complies to the standard or not. And within the blockchain world, it's actually that standard part is really missing. So there's not a good standard. So for example, a bridge, what should be in a bridge or how should it be secured? And I did some attempts of starting such a checklist, but pretty soon it gets pretty complicated and detailed. And the way you should do it, I think, is you should first identify patterns that are being used. And then for each pattern being used, you should have very detailed checklists and things to look at.
Can you give an example of a pattern that you might notice that you would then have a?
Yeah, a pattern would be, for example, pausing a contract or using an ERC20.
An AMM, would that be a pattern? Like a constant product?
Yeah, like an AMM. Yeah, and that will be quite a big one. So yeah, the bigger the object is, the more difficult it is to create good checklists and standards. But it would be nice if they would be there. And there are quite a few attempts from several people creating them. But it would be nice to combine all those attempts. Yeah, we have 2 minutes left.
If no one else is going to ask a question, I'm just going to keep taking advantage of your time, Gerard.
No problem.
So kind of like a follow-up to that, right? So just in general, what is your feeling on kind of the future of auditing? Do you think this like time-boxed audit is here to stay, or are we kind of moving towards a different model?
Yeah, it's going to stay a while, I guess. But it would also be good to have different models because it's still not good enough. However, I try and we try as a team. I'm still not convinced that you can find all the issues that there are, even if you had twice as much time or 3 times as much time. So we need more powerful mechanisms to make sure we find everything. But I'm not convinced or sure what that would be.
Like, isn't Spirit doing this new thing with what do they call it, with the CISO, like it's like CISO service or something, and there's like weekly meetings with the client and etc.
Yeah, that's also an interesting approach, but that's more giving advice to the project and advising them to incorporate security from the very start of the project, for example, and to have security in the Web 2 part of the project, and more general security everywhere. So that's just an advice role. So that of course also helps, but it's is also not sufficient.
Gotcha.
So we are at time. I guess since there are no more questions, we can stop here. So yeah, Thank you so much, Gerard, for this wonderful presentation and answering questions so patiently. It was fun.